we owe a great deal of thanks to the Axel and Margaret Axelsson Johnson's Foundation for this generous endowment in order for us to do something to contribute to Swedish security and defense in a very, very specific situation, a very exceptional. We haven't been in this in my lifetime, and even if I had been 200 years old, I wouldn't have had the same experience at any time. So let us also say that this is a pro bono work. No one is paid for this work. It is a contribution from the Academy to the public debate, to the democratic dialogue on very difficult issues. We know now almost certainly that we will be members of NATO within a week or so. And we are, and this is a contribution not least from Carlis, who you will hear from later, one of our most experienced members of one of our important projects in the past, the KB21, that we have to relate to the objectives of NATO, which have been agreed by a series of summits and which are laid down in the treaty. See, this is a summary from Atlantic Council recently. We talk about deterrence, we talk about assuring collective defense. We're talking more specifically about incorporating new technologies into military capabilities, engaging new defenders beyond the traditional state-centric military model, increasing capacity for multi-domain operations, and adding new resources to support these changes. What Sweden donated to Ukraine only the other day, yesterday, I think very well demonstrates this multi-dimensional character of the challenge that we meet and that our allies will meet and that Ukraine meet. So there is a need to, of course, learn from the mistakes that we have made. And we have in the Academy and in the different working groups of the project hundreds of years of experience, maybe even 1,000 years in the Academy as a whole, of things that we have done right, but also things that we have done wrong, and where we can learn from the mistakes that have been made in the past and do better. And this process is, of course, already underway very much when it comes to Ukraine, working with off-the-shelf, cheap products, first-person view drones and so on, but which are supported in the rear by extremely sophisticated intelligence and new maps and satellites and so on. It's an interesting combination. The whole development of autonomous weapon systems, 3D printing, the space assets, where we have important efforts on the way inside the Academy by several of our members, and of course the importance of voluntary organization. And anyone who reads Financial Times or Economist and so on, there are lots of articles in these days of how volunteer organizations in Ukraine are training people. They are sort of scaling up very quickly, not waiting for the bureaucracy to work its way through. So it's an interesting and fascinating development. And by the way, the picture that you see up to the right is one of my new Facebook groups that I've joined. The First Person View Drone Voluntary Association of Sweden, which is not a military. It is a civilian organization with drone enthusiasts, young people, who about 6,000 people, who could be useful in my view. And here you see in the battlefield how they use an older version of the drone I own myself, but a DJI drone from China, but it's a drone which is supported from behind by enormous technological developments. And here you see the Pentagon autonomous weapons planning system. It's not a small thing that is underway here. And of course, it is on the other side, there is enormous, fast development. Eric Schmidt, the previous head of Google, wrote about it in I think Economist or Financial Times the other day. We are losing the drone war. He's extremely worried. So everything has to be done. This links up to the fact that we are talking here in Sweden as a NATO member, not only about deterrence, not only about defense, but also about resilience. And resilience means, according to the dictionary, the capacity of a strained body to recover its size and shape after a deformation. We know that we need to go from a reactive to proactive security policy. We need to thrive under pressure in EU and NATO. And what I want to mention here, for those who don't know it, that there is already a policy for this in the EU, then there is a policy for it in NATO. And it's called How to Thrive Under Pressure, NATO's Human Capital Innovation concept. So, SVAR in the parlance of the project will be how to bounce back from pressure. The way we bounced back during the pandemic, and the way we must learn to bounce back all kinds of difficulties that we will get in different sectors of the threats and challenges we will meet. So we have an organization, a beginning, which is based on some of the questions that we thought were the right ones to put when we started up the discussions with the Presidium of the Academy, and where we added a project group, for instance, on defense industry and the use of the importance of the private sector. And you can see here some of the vectors of this work, and there might be more. We don't know. We might have to reallocate, reprioritize as we go by. On the website, you will find this in 2 languages so far, both Swedish and English. And in fact, I should mention already now that one of our members here, Lars-Erik Lundin, aussi il parle le français, lui. So we intend to speak, wir sprechen auch Deutsch in diesem Projekt, and we are going to Berlin, and we are trying now to help, and the president of the academy is pushing hard for this, that we should be a multilingual academy, and we should be able to communicate not only with our corresponding members but also with others. So far we can see a project in 3 phases. We have a pilot project, a small booklet, which is already almost done. People will speak about what's in it. Might come out this summer. We think we will probably make a second intermediate report after the American elections, somewhere around there, to assess, to take stock of the situation, where are we? And then a final report towards the end of 2025 with an international conference, hopefully. So thanks to the efforts of our editor and his, Marie Brunberg and others, we have already a web page which you can access, and which will be populated not only by things that we write in the small group, but everything which is relevant for the project from members of the Academy and other friends will come in under different headings here. And there is an English version as well here, as you can see. There are already podcasts that have been produced about the general situation and so on. And I should mention, for those of you who are on LinkedIn, who could think to go on LinkedIn, there will be a closed group, is already a closed group on LinkedIn, where we can start to discuss between us. I should already now make the apology that we are not going to have a possibility to have many questions today from the audience, because it's a very tight program. So let's see this as a first presentation of the menu, and then start the discussion on LinkedIn or in other ways on the web page and so on after the meeting. After we have put out the different presentations on YouTube, we can have a dedicated. So that you can apply to join this debate. The priorities will change over time, we expect that. And the question is, what will be the right questions in each phase of the project? We know now that Ukraine has first priority, but what questions come in the next phase after that? What is the added value of the academy? That is something we constantly ask ourselves. When Christina Bergendahl and Tommy Åkesson and others have this flood of intelligence and information and reports and people who want to brief them, what can we add? Well, that is precisely the question we need to constantly have in our mind. And you see in the second, in the middle there, perhaps one of the answers, namely that we are allowed to speculate a little bit more than you can do in official documents. We can discuss the problems we have on the Western side as well, not only in the United States with our American friends, but also among our friends in Europe. What does it mean? And several of the presentations you will hear here today will come in on that topic. And then we need to talk about not just what we should do, but what we can do from a political perspective. And there will be both constraints and enablers from that perspective. What sets a limit for what we can do? In our previous projects, Marie Hofström and others, we came up with a question of the human being as not just money. It's a question of having people who are motivated and trained to do what needs to be done. And here, Björn Sjölov and his people will have an enormously interesting challenge to try to understand how we can mobilize this capacity. And there the private sector is a very important part of the picture. And we need to talk about action-reaction. You will hear Mikael Salin talk about this very soon. This is one of the pairs of concepts which are so important to understand. I just mentioned the drone war, just one example. Yes, the Ukrainians get a lot of development in the drone sector, but so do the Russians. And what will happen over time? So it's always a question of what is the net result of different processes. So we need, of course, to have SVAR, the two tankestrecken indicate that we're talking about something which should last, should be resilient over longer periods of time. And in order to do that, we also need to look at the synergies between the different working areas, part of the project. Between the general international situation, which Mikael Salin will soon address, and then also Gunilla, and the total defense concept. Security policy and deterrence, relation to nuclear weapons, Lars-Erik Lundin will come into that picture soon, and the question of hybrid attacks, which of course has a close link to nuclear weapons. Johan Victorin will come into that field soon as well. The relationship between deterrence and resilience as a necessary condition for deterrence. And I already now want to say to Mr. Holmström over there that yes, we are going to use the word motståndskraft in Swedish. So we listen to people who come up with good ideas. But in English, it's still resilience, I think. Military civilian, including technology, the total defense and the private sector, which is extremely important, and we can see that in Ukraine. And of course, all voluntary efforts. The fact that we have many people in Sweden now who want to do something for defense. Resilience and the link to hybrid. Johan Victorin will come into the fact that we cannot just look defensively at what resilience requires from us, but also do something in the other direction, also see what countermeasure we can take. The important link, Borika, between supply security, where you will make, I think, the central effort, and the wider spectrum of issues related to flow security, in and out, good and bad flows. And there we have, of course, naval considerations, where this is highly topical right now, all over the place, so to say, globally speaking. And that also indicates a question which I think Carlis will write about and we'll come back to. What are we going to be required to do in terms of out-of-area work? And asymmetric questions. What happens with sanctions? How pessimistic should we be about the possibilities to actually make some difference with sanctions? There we're going to have to listen also to research that has been undertaken also in this country. I'm thinking of Peter Wallenstein and others who have studied earlier cases of sanctions. So there is a lot of things to be done. Total defense, where are we supposed to work? I think Carlis will have an idea what should be the first priority there in terms of military defense. Who is going to be involved? And what exactly should we focus on? Black swans. Carlis and I, we had some brainstorming over it. What happens after American elections? What would be the situation if there is a forced or a actually negotiated ceasefire? We mentioned the sanction issue. How will Russia maintain its resilience? How does the Middle East come into this? Where Mikael, of course, is contributing a lot to the debate, among others, here in the Academy. And then I mentioned out-of-area operations. And then, on top of that, we have China, Taiwan, nuclear weapons. Will there be another pandemic, another catastrophe, a climate event, which completely will dominate the picture? So, not a small menu. Too much. Some people in our presidium tells us constantly, you have to focus. Yes, but the Russians say, and if you listen to Gudrun Persson and others, the Russians have said, at least in 2012, perhaps earlier, that security is everything. Security is a combination of everything you can do in all areas. So anyone